Hello everyone, thank you all so much for being here today. This is really exciting. It's my second time presenting research, so bear with me if I get nervous or if I don't speak loud enough. If I don't, please let me know so I can raise my voice. But my name is Andrea Moreno. I'm part of the Anthropology Club, and today I will be introducing you to my research on sky burials. So just to forward a disclaimer, the following presentation will contain images and language that might be emotionally sensitive for some people. So please be advised, I will be showing pictures of human remains, bones, blood, and human decomposition. So if that is something that triggers you, you have been advised. All right, so I would like to read this quote by Francois Daster. But she proposes that the only death which we are confronted is the death of others. Death is an experience that we all come across at some point in our lives, whether that is through experiencing by the loss of important members of our community and our family, or through our own personal experience of the final moment where we are just about to basically leave this life, this body, this earth. And so the experience of death has been something that has shaped us, not only culturally, but also spiritually too. And so there are a lot of things that the experience of death leaves us with. And so death can be seen as a state of liminality. It is where you are transcending from going from being alive, here fully in the present, to transitioning into this different space of being or dying, basically. I'm really nervous, sorry. There are ceremonial customs that go with the experience of death. Death rituals are a state of liminality that vary culturally. Different cultures view death differently, and so this is just trying to highlight that. When we lose somebody that is dear to us, we experience mourning and grief, which are very important emotions for our human experience. They shape us into who we are, and I mean, they can really impact us in many ways. But there are also some implications of death rituals, which basically would allow us for us to strengthen our bonds within communities. And so death is an experience, and yeah, I'm sorry, I'm blocking out. So a lot of what we know from our human development and evolution has been because of the archaeological remains that we have found, whether that is from stone tools, tool making, which indicate there is complex thinking, and we are essentially interpreting our world to act upon it, through art and storytelling, and most importantly, through burial sites, which would indicate that there is a sense of emotional connection that is going on within communities even thousands of years ago. And so today we will be focusing on the Himalayan region. Archaeologists have recently pushed the earliest human habitation of the Himalayan region as far back as 10,000 years ago, and this has been supported by archaic grave sites. Unfortunately, I was not able to find any pictures to prove this point, but here you kind of have an idea of what it is. And so today we're going to be talking on Tibetan culture and how they experience the transition of life to death and essentially rebirth. So I'm sure you have all probably at some point, maybe you haven't, maybe you have seen these flags somewhere around. They are kind of known in like spiritual communities. I have seen them a lot online and stuff like that. But these are actually from Tibetan culture, and they have spiritual significance. So I do have to mention that there are political reasons as to why Tibet is no longer the country that it is now. Because in 1959, it was invaded by Chinese officials, essentially they underwent a sort of modern colonization, and so Tibetans were exiled. Their leader at the time, and I mean it still is their leader now, but it's a lot more different because it's not what it used to be. The Dalai Lama, which here I have a picture of, he's the 14th Dalai Lama and the Bodhisattva of compassion. He is not only their spiritual leader, but also their political figure. And so him getting exiled basically meant a lot of things and has shaped a lot of changes within their culture. Here I have some pictures of kids dressed in monk robes. They most likely grow up in monasteries. And here I have a picture of some people wearing traditional Tibetan clothing. And here's a monk doing a retreat within the caves of the Himalayan mountains. And yeah, their culture is deeply rooted with Buddhist principles and practices. And so, as I previously said, their whole social structure is deeply connected with it. And so I will show you a video of one of the ceremonies that take place when trying to identify a new reincarnation of a previous Lama. So you know how I mentioned how their leader is the Dalai Lama? Well, he is considered a reincarnation of the past Bodhisattva, or Buddha of compassion. And essentially, within the monastery, kids, once a high Lama passes away, it is said that they tend to reincarnate. And so here's a video showing a ceremony of that. Oh, wait. Hold on. Sorry. And so like I previously said, like once a high lama or a tulku, which is a reincarnated spiritual leader, passes away, he is said to leave traces or clues as to where he will be reincarnating next in the following life, so that he can return to the monastery lineage and keep leading the people into achieving liberation and achieving enlightenment. And so how they choose the children, and I will talk more about this later on, but they usually go through a set of rites, and there are rituals to try to see like where the new child might be found. These are esoteric practices, so there's not a lot of information as to how that actually happens. We don't really know unless you're part of the monastery, the lineage. But essentially, there will be clues that are left out. Sometimes the previous lama will sort of indicate, oh, I'm going to reincarnate in this specific place, and there will be these signs, and that's how you will know. And so essentially, once they have those clues, there's a team of lamas that will go and search for the child, and once they actually find the child, then they will test him by putting a bunch of items that could be like either food, toys, books, or anything that is personal to that past reincarnation, so a personal item from the past lama, and if the child happens to choose the item that belongs to that past reincarnation, then that's how they would know that it is his new embodiment. Yeah. And so then once these kids are found, they're raised in monasteries. They learn how to meditate from very young. They're raised with Buddhist, within the Buddhist religion and that sort of thing. And I would like to point out too that the kind of Buddhism they practice in Tibet is very different. There's like different branches to Buddhism. You have the Theravada, the Mahayana branch, and then Vajrayana, which is the one they practice here. And it's very unique because they they kind of merge a lot of traditions together to create this very special and specific branch of it. As we know, Buddhism originated in India and was later spread to different parts of the world. But the interesting thing about this specific region is that it mixed with the traditional folk of the Himalayan region, also known as Bon, and yeah, eventually it developed into something more unique to the area. And so, oh, actually, here you have a picture of the Dalai Lama as a little kid. Like I said, when the whole political situation was going on in 1959, he had to flee, being only 12 years old, to India so he wouldn't get killed, basically. And so we're focusing on the experience of death, right? And so today we will be looking into their tradition of sky burials. So essentially what it is once the person dies, their body is taken to this special place up in the mountains where he will be dismembered, cut into pieces, and then fed to vultures. I have a video to that later.
Have you heard of sky burial? Can you imagine how sky burial thinks as Buddha, who gave his body to save the starving tigress? This shows compassion. And many people think after we die everything is finished. But in Buddhism, we believe we still can practice Buddhism and learn even from that body. The most important sky burial in Tibet is located at Drikung Monastery, around 200 kilometers east of Lhasa. Drikung Monastery was founded in 12th century. Traditionally, the monastery is the main seat of Drikung Kagyu sect of Tibetan Buddhism. The sky burial of Drikung Monastery is so famous that people bring dead bodies from all around the Tibet, even 1,000 kilometers far away, to get blessed. Here you can see this car is from northern Tibet, around 500 kilometers away, to do the sky burial here. Now they are bringing the dead body near Satimarpo. So Satimarpo is the throne of the Guru Rinpoche, and Tibetan people have a believing that if you leave the dead body under Satimarpo throne for one night, he will be reborn as a human in his next life again. So first in the morning, before they start sky burial, every corpse must have to bring in front of the main assembly hall of Drikung Monastery, and then the monks will organize power ceremony. The history of sky burial is actually started from the 12th century, known as Parto Kyoto, but they may have gone on for much longer. The process of the sky burial, once the body reached to the sky burial platform, the master have to separate hair from skulls and have to check if the skull have hole or not. If the skull have a hole, it means that the spirit have went up to the paradise, and then he have to separate flesh from bones, and first he will chop down all the bones into powder and mix it with the human organs, and first he have to serve the bones and the organs, and finally he will serve flesh to the vultures. So this is the basic information about sky burial in Tibet, and as a tourist you may not have chance to visit sky burial in person.
Yeah, so it has actually become a tourist attraction, but it's a bit controversial because, yeah, it's not something that is done with respect a lot of times, so, yeah, anyways. Alright, so the actual translation for the name of this burial is not actually, it's not actually called the sky burial. In Tibet, they simply allude to this ritual as to be carried to the mountain. And as you saw in the video, once the body goes through this whole chanting and ritualistic guidance through, the process of death, they are carried on a family member's back all the way up to the charnel grounds. Now the Tokden, which is the person that is responsible for cutting up the bodies, is actually just like another person from the community. Their job is specifically to take care of this sort of business. And obviously it's a very harsh practice, so when they do this sort of thing, they're actually engaging in tantric practices, which allow them to essentially practice their compassion, and it is a tool for their own personal spiritual journey to overcome duality, mental constructions, what is pure, what is impure, and to essentially transcend through that. So it's a very hands-on tantric practice to achieve that universal state of, I guess, that universal awareness, so to say. And so the vultures are actually the fiercest category of Dakinis, who are the female embodiments of the cosmic female energy that can also be equated to wisdom. Now so the vultures actually become the sacred embodiment of this cosmic energy. And there are different depictions for it. Sometimes you have the wrathful depiction, which is essentially what the vulture is becoming. And they're also known as Chasha Khandros, which are breath takers, flesh eaters, blood drinkers, and bone chewers. And as you can see here, I thought it was interesting to show you all. She is about to drink blood from a skull cup, which I have a picture of right here. They're called kapalas, and it's pretty interesting. I will break down the death ritual a little bit more by explaining what happens before the bodies are actually taken to get dismembered. But basically, so once a person dies or is in the process of dying, a lama, who is a spiritual teacher or leader, will be called upon so that he can basically be there in the time of death and guide the consciousness of the person through the intermediate states, the liminal states of being alive and transitioning into another life. And so this book is actually, so they do the chanting to help their consciousness transcend through this stage of liminality. And the reason why they do this is because, as I previously mentioned, in Vajrayana Buddhism, they believe in reincarnation. Of course, there's the wheel of samsara, which is the constant wheel of birth and death. Now this can be taken literally, but it can also be taken as different realms, so state of mind or state of being. But here I kind of have it broken down a little bit. There are different realms. You have the God realm, the demigod realm, the hungry ghost realm, hell, animal realm, the human realm, and the human realm. And it is only in the human realm where you are most capable of achieving enlightenment and liberating yourself from this constant wheel of change and suffering and such. And so, going back to the chanting that is done while the person is either in the process of dying or already dead, they are read, these chants from this book. It's called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or also known as the Bard of Phodo. And it is essentially a guide for the consciousness of the person to either achieve enlightenment within the recitations of the chanting, or to achieve a favorable rebirth in a later life. Now, there's another case where highly meditative practitioners such as lamas or tulkus will essentially pass away in a state of deep meditation. They do this by simply meditating for a really long time, and they are actually able to sort of separate themselves, so they can, they separate their consciousness from their bodies and eventually pass away. And when they do so, their body turns into a rainbow body, which essentially begins to dissolve on its own. And so here I have some pictures of some of the rainbow bodies. But it's really interesting. Apparently their bodies like dissolve completely, only leaving like fingernails and maybe like hair and stuff like that. But I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, so in the picture you have a person wrapped around, and what is the container that he is being held on?
The container?
Yeah.
This one?
Yes.
Oh, this is a cooler. But they're actually kept like until their bodies fully dissolve, so to say. They're like very sacred, so they're kept until like they're gone, or I don't know, their body doesn't decompose anymore. It's actually being studied right now. I think the Dalai Lama invited scientists to explore this state of mind by basically having people that are there to sort of monitor their heartbeat and see like how this whole thing actually happens. So it's pretty interesting. I'm curious to see like what they find. And something that I found throughout my research that I thought was kind of interesting is that historically there are some parallels to sky burials in Zoroastrianism. This is a religion that is argued to be the first monotheistic religion, and the interesting thing about it is that geographically it's like relatively close to the Himalayan region, as you can see, so maybe something like that must have happened. And they have these towers of silence, which is basically where they bring the bodies, they dispose of them there, and then vultures come to get rid of the remains. And the reason why they do that, and the reason why they are in these towers, is because they believe that when the body dies, if it decomposes and it touches the ground, it would be essentially like polluting it, and so they want to try to avoid that by taking the bodies to these places that are higher up, not touching the ground. And so, essentially, what this whole research has shown me is that your beliefs shape your reality, and they shape the way you experience life, and they shape the way you experience death, and how you even think of death, as a matter of fact. It's very interesting, because going back to the argument that this experience of death could have been the origin of religion, or just like, considering like if there is life after death, what happens to our souls when we're no longer in our bodies. I think it's very interesting to see how cross-culturally it varies, and yeah, I just think it's pretty interesting. So if anyone has any questions, please go ahead, raise your hand. I'll try my best to answer them if I wasn't clear about something.
I have a question. So what happens when a person dies and there's no family to carry them?
Usually, since they are driven, since the culture in its own is driven by compassionate acts, someone else that maybe isn't a family member might take upon the job, but it's usually done. Like, they don't really leave the bodies like that to decompose, because without the bodies being eaten by the vultures, there is no reincarnation happening in the end, because they have to get rid of the bodies completely. And yeah, I think I forgot to mention that, but yeah.
My question would be for the vulture type burial. Is it for anyone that dies in that community, or is it a certain status quo that you have to follow?
Usually, it can be monks, men, women, children, anyone is subject to these burials. But when we're talking about, for example, the tulkus, who are the reincarnated Lama spiritual teachers, that are like embodiments of other reincarnations, they tend to go through a different process. Some of them will get, what is it called? Their bones will be placed in like these statues, and they will become relics. So yeah, they will become relics, and it'll be like something that is sacred. So lay people might come and like pray for them, or just go up to them for like auspicious purposes. And other times, they incinerate them. And yeah.
I have a question. I have actually two. First one is like, have you run across the numbers of how many are these sky burials a daily occurrence, or they are only done on certain days? And follow-up question would be kind of following the first one. How often these birds will eat, and if there are any instances of them attacking a person that is sleeping instead of being dead, are there any reports of that? I'm just curious about that. If you run across that information.
For the specific times and days, I don't think there is any like specific days that are more auspicious than others for the burial to take place. That's something I'm not too sure on. But for the other thing, yeah, I believe so the vultures usually stay in like specific areas of the hills or the mountains, so they don't tend to go into like the city or the town, so to say. And I don't know, like the Tokden, the sky burial masters, kind of create a relationship with the vultures, so sometimes they can literally be called upon by singing, like chanting, or they just simply yeah.
It's like a pet relationship when
Kind
they
of.
associate you.
Yeah.
Through your research, has there been any parallels between the Tibetan region and their form of burials and any other regions surrounding it, or is this purely a Tibetan practice?
It's not exclusively Tibetan. It is found in other communities within the Himalayan region. I think they've done them too in like China, Mongolia, and such. So yeah, it's not exclusive to it. Actually, the origins of the sky burials are not really known. There's just parallels to it, but I think it's characteristic of just Himalayan region, the hills, the mountains, the altitude. Sorry.
Is there a minimum period of time to take the body to the mountains? Like if the body is getting stiff on a rigor mortis do they still take it to the vultures?
Yes, they do. They usually take about 3 days, like for the whole death ritual to happen. So they don't take too long.
But I mean,
Or,
if the person who died, I don't know, like 3 days ago
Mhm.
or 4 days ago, do they still accept the body?
yeah, they do. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, is this burial practice like indiscriminate? Like, say someone in the village did like a horrible crime, would there be still people like to step up after they die and like do this type of burial, or is it only reserved for like, people that didn't do anything bad in their life?
No, it's fully inclusive. They do say though that if the vultures like don't eat the body quickly enough, because I didn't show a video of it, but usually like once the body is laid out, the vultures will come and they will devour it basically. But they say that if the vultures don't do that, or if they take longer, or they choose not to kind of mess around with it, it's because of your past karma. But it's still essentially like you're still essentially gonna get consumed eventually. And I don't think I mentioned this too, but once like the meat is gone and the bones are left, they will be smashed into a fine powder mixed with barley and then fed to the vultures. So really like every part of the body is, it's consumed. Sorry. Yeah.
Or when they choosing the new Dalai Lama, what is their success rate of actually pinpointing the actual person that's gonna be reincarnated? And what if they don't choose the right one? What happens?
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of up in the air. They have their own practices that are kind of secretive, or they're esoteric. So we can't really know for sure what it is, how they do it, or I know they use oracles sometimes. It's kind of complicated. There's not a lot of information to look into. But, I mean, if you think about it, the kids are kind of chosen when they're very young. So between the ages of 1 to like 4 perhaps. And so honestly it's kind of based off of the kids actually choosing something that, like an item that did belong to a past reincarnation, and just the signs kind of adding up. But then eventually like the kids are raised in the monasteries, so they will be like more inclined to the spiritual teachings and meditative practices and such, and so I don't know, it's kind of raises a question of like how much nurturing and like growing up, like where you grow up in, kind of shapes you as a person and your identity too. So I think it's
Follow-up question. What happens to the parents? Do they get benefits from that?
I would say like socially they do, but it's not like they get any money or anything like that. They just kind of think it's an honor for their child to be the new body of this new reincarnation of this, highly respected and like appreciated bodhisattva.
Do they get to choose whether or not they can take the child away, or how does that work?
I believe they don't really like oppose it. Yeah, that's a good question actually.
I have a very, very specific question. If you can answer, that would be great.
Yeah.
So the macerators, people who are cutting up the bodies, are they using very specific tools? Because
yeah.
it will require some serious knowledge of anatomy to cut up the body, or a heavy tool
Yes.
if someone is just to chop up the body. So I'm curious if there is a specific tool, and if that specific tool is like passed from one person to the next as a holy tool, or everyone, do you see what I mean? Or
Yeah.
everyone have their own, or?
I'm not too sure on the specifics of it, but I do have a picture right here. Hold on. I'll have to go here. So you see this knife right here? Apparently this is the kind of knife they use to cut up the bodies. So it's a very like sharp and like, it's shaped specifically. I couldn't find a picture of the actual tool itself, but from what I read and from my research, it seems like this is what is sort of used. Yeah, it's what it's used. And they also use, what is it, like a hammer to, I guess, make the bones into a fine powder. And yeah.
Interesting.
Yes. If you don't know, it's okay. What do you know? What type of culture that is? If not, it's okay. Yeah. And also another quick one. What does assertance mean? When you refer to the culture being
Esoteric.
Oh, what?
what was the word?
Esoteric?
Yes.
Oh, esoteric basically means that it's like kind of hidden practices, so you can only access them if you are a part of the monastery or the lineage on its own. So it's like knowledge or wisdom that is only accessed through like a series of years in ordination, and it's the whole thing.